Hello everyone and welcome back to Miss Key's Classroom. My name is Rachel and today I am joining you from Miss Key's Classroom again because I'm going to be talking about my classroom management strategies and the behaviour management strategies that I've picked up during my first 3 years of teaching. I just want to preface this video by saying I am by no means an expert in behaviour management or classroom management. I am definitely still learning myself, but the things I share in this video are just the things that I found effective and that hopefully you can find effective too when you are creating your classroom and trying to manage the students and manage behaviour and all those sorts of things. So I hope you enjoy this video and let's get straight into it. So in this video, I'm sort of going to run through how my lessons look and the sort of strategies that I build into each lesson to effectively manage behaviour and manage the class. So yeah, I'll be sort of going through step by step during the lessons what I would be doing. So my first strategy that I use is greeting the students at the beginning of the lesson. Depending on when I have the lesson during the day, sometimes I can get to the classroom before the students and I can greet each student as they walk through the door. I really like doing this because it makes the students feel like they're valued, it makes them feel really welcome in the space and makes them feel like, okay, I'm valued, I want to be here and the teacher's happy to see me. So whether it's just like a good morning or a hi, how you going, maybe asking them how their day's been so far or how their weekend was or whatever. I think that greeting the students as they walk in is a really positive way to start off a lesson and just engage with the students in a positive way before you actually start teaching. So that's the first thing that I do. So the next thing that I do is that I always have the lesson activities up on the board, especially for my middle school students. I do this throughout the year levels, not quite as much for year 12. I do definitely do a lesson plan sort of outline thing, but it's not quite as detailed. But definitely for year 8s, I make sure that I have the lesson plan or the lesson outline up on the screen, up on the board before they even come in so that they know exactly what we're doing. They can walk in, they can see the board and they think, oh, okay, we're doing reading to start off with, or we're doing letter writing or whatever it is. And so the reason that I do that is it sort of helps the students get into the zone for learning. They can see the board, they know step by step what we're going to be doing. And I think that as a student, I always wanted to know what we were going to be doing in the lesson. I didn't really like any surprises. And so that also helps students to know like what they need to achieve by the end of the lesson and where they should be at by the end of the lesson. I use this daily board for my year 8 class and I put it up at the beginning of each lesson and it's literally just a to-do list of what we're going to do. As you can see, it also includes the lesson objectives so that the students know what they're going to achieve by the end of the lesson after we complete all the activities. And the next thing that I do when I need the class to be quiet is I use a few strategies depending on the class. So for my class, for my home group class, my year 8s, I teach them for home group English and HASS. So we've got pretty good relationships and they know my sort of signals for when I need them to be quiet. So for that class, I simply just raise my hand like this, and then they know that they need to raise theirs too. They know that it means mouths closed, eyes to the front, laptops closed, everything out of your hands because you need to raise your hand. If they're not listening and they're not doing both hands, I'll often do 2 like this, and then I'll do like spirit fingers and we'll do a little dance or whatever so that I know that they're listening, I know they're engaged, and I don't stop until every single kid is doing that. That works if you have, I guess, a class that you can build that into, if that makes sense. So I started that in the first lesson that I ever met those year 8s. I literally taught them like, this is, I'm raising my hand, you need to raise your hand too. And we practiced it over and over again. So definitely when you're first starting out with a class, set up those norms so that you can get their attention. There's other ways that you can do it as well. Some people do like the countdown, the like 3, 2, 1, or I often say with a few of my other classes, like in 20 seconds, I need eyes to the front, and then I keep counting down. I say, all right, in 10 seconds, books closed. In 5 seconds, ears this way, and then everyone's quiet, if that makes sense. So it's just about working out what works for you, but definitely teach your class this. So don't just expect them that one day you're going to start raising your hand and they're just automatically going to know what to do. Tell them what your expectation is and keep practicing it until they all follow it. So yeah, that's just a couple of ideas for how you can, I guess, get a class's attention rather than like screaming over them, like eyes to the front or whatever, because obviously that will wreck your voice after a while and isn't the most effective way to get the class's attention. So leading on from that, about saving your voice, try and speak at the volume that you want students to speak at. I struggle with this a little bit because sometimes I do tend to just start like talking over them or, trying to beat their volume so that they listen. So this is definitely one that I am still working on. But try and model the volume that you want them to speak at. Or I found that if I'm speaking up the front of the class, and students are talking, if I just suddenly start whispering, then they are like, hold on, what happened? Like, what's she saying? I can't hear. And then they quieten down because at the end of the day, they do want to hear what you have to say, or the majority of students want to hear what you have to say. So if you sort of change up your volume a little bit, maybe lower your voice a little bit, they might tune in a little bit more. And so yeah, make sure you're not screaming over the students or yelling over them because you will really wreck your voice. Instead, model the volume that you actually want them to speak at, so that they know what you expect of them. Okay, so now let's talk about some more strategies that you can use when you are talking to a whole class. So you've got all their attention and you've started talking, and then maybe a couple of students start whispering or start playing with something on the table in front of them. There's a couple of techniques that I like to use that I find really effective and that don't interrupt the flow of your lesson or the instructions that you're giving. And so the first one is silence. So maybe you're up the front and you're talking to the whole class, and then kids start talking or something like that. You just stop mid-sentence and you wait for quiet, because immediately if you start talking, they know, oh, something's happened, something's gone wrong, and then they'll sort of realize it's probably me, I'm not doing the right thing. And so combined with silence, you can use the look, which is where you are standing at the front, you are watching a couple of kids who are at the back and they're talking when you're talking, and then suddenly you just stop mid-sentence and you can look at them as well. Eventually they're going to be like, oh my God, she's looking at me. Whoops, what have I done wrong? And so they're just a couple of strategies. You can also just use their name. So maybe it's little Johnny up the back, and so you're talking and you're going through your instructions. Yep, Johnny, thank you. And then you can just keep going, or Johnny, put that down, and you can just keep talking. So using their name is really effective because they know you're talking to them. And so yeah, you've got things like the silence, the look, using their name are all really effective to keep hold of their attention when you are speaking up the front, and just refocus them if maybe they are getting a little bit distracted by something around them. Another one I forgot to mention is proximity. And so if you're standing up the front, obviously the people who are right up the front are going to be really engaged in what you're saying, or hopefully they will be, because they're right in front of you. But maybe you've got a few kids who are up the back who are messing around, chatting when you're chatting or something like that. You can just slowly walk over to them, stand behind them and teach from there. You don't even have to stop speaking. And so as you get closer to them, they're going to realize, oh, she means business right now. She's trying to talk and we're talking. And so you just move over to where they are, and often they will immediately stop doing whatever they're doing and they'll look at you and think, oh, sorry, I wasn't listening. And so that's another one that you can use, whether it's when you are, maybe the kids are doing work and you know that a few of them are off task. You can just slowly walk over to them, and they'll soon notice that you're on your way over to them, and they'll quickly start doing their work. So walking around the room, even when you're teaching, sometimes I like to teach from the back of the room, just to mix things up. So yeah, definitely using proximity as well is really useful. So the next thing that I do is I set really clear expectations for the students, and I don't settle for anything less than those expectations. So depending on the class, there's a few ways that you can do this. Some of them, if you've got quite a receptive class, you can sort of just tell them what your expectations are. Maybe your school has set expectations for students, but definitely establishing them with your students and making sure that they know what those expectations are. So for example, one of mine in my class is that when someone's up the front talking, everyone has their laptop closed. And so the students know that when someone comes to the front, they just immediately close their laptops now, because I've sort of ingrained that into them, that to show respect to the person speaking, we don't need our laptop open unless the teacher asks you to. And so that's just one sort of expectation that I set. If you've got perhaps a younger year level class, or a class that you have just met for the first time, to help build those relationships, it can be a good idea to actually establish the class expectations together. So the way that I like to do this is I give students A3 paper in groups, and they split it in half, and on one side they have to write down what a good student looks like, what they would act like, what they'd sound like, or maybe what they think what a teacher should expect of students. And then on the other side they do the same for the teacher. So what does a good teacher act like or look like? Maybe what should expectations be of teachers? And then what we do is we'll do a big walk around, and the students can look at other sheets and see what other people have said, and then they have to put a little star next to the ones that lots of people have said. So maybe it's that everyone should show respect to each other or something like that. And so then what I do is I grab all of those A3 sheets of paper and I compile those into a list of classroom expectations. So I have expectations for the students and expectations for me as the teacher, because I think what students want to see is like that we have expectations too, and that there's things that we as teachers need to do. And so that helps them feel respected and feel valued if they know, okay, if I'm going to do this, then Miss Key is going to do this for me, if that makes sense. I think it's really important that once you do create these classroom expectations, make them clear to students, print it on the biggest paper you have, and refer back to them. So maybe a student's off task, you can say, hey, you're not following expectation number 4, or whatever it is. And so I think that creating those with students makes them more likely to want to follow those expectations, because they know they've had an input into deciding what they are, and then they understand that for the teacher to, you know, maybe be flexible or be positive or whatever it is, that they then also need to follow the expectations. I hope I've explained that one well. But yeah, definitely if you are going to create classroom expectations, consider doing it with the students so that they feel like they are heard and that they've got a voice in what happens in the classroom as well. So the next one is some positive reinforcement. I know there is lots of research around positive and negative reinforcement, but for me personally, I think that positive reinforcement has an amazing impact on student behaviour and really does encourage the students to strive for more positive behaviour, if that makes sense. And so what I'll often do is maybe I've asked the class to be quiet or something, and I'm waiting up the front. What I'll start doing is I'll start thanking the students who are doing the right thing. So thank you, Sarah, thank you, Lauren, thank you, James. And I'll just start going around the class, and the kids will listen, because whether it's that they actually want to be thanked or praised, I don't know, but I found that that's really effective. So that's just one sort of example of positive reinforcement. But then there's things like individual positive reinforcement. So obviously things like rewards, like if a student finishes their work on time, they get free time at the end of class or something like that, or an early minute or something like that. So it's really up to you how you like to do positive reinforcement, but I really like to do that sort of positive praise, where you really encourage the students and you praise the behaviour that you want to see, rather than identifying the behaviour that you don't, or focusing on the behaviour that you don't. So for example, if we go back to the example of all the students are talking and only a couple are paying attention, rather than saying, hey, James, stop talking, or hey, Eddie, stop talking, you focus back on those kids that are listening and you thank them for listening, and then you'll see it and it will spread around the room. Obviously, things like that don't work with all classes. It's just about experimenting and working out what works for you. Another thing that I have adopted this year is a whole class reward. And so what we have done is at the school I'm at, we have we have school values, 5 school values. And so what we've decided is that when the whole class shows one of the school values, then the letter gets highlighted up on our wall for our whole class reward. Once the students have highlighted all the letters for each value, then they'll get some sort of class reward. So maybe it might be, I don't know, a movie, or we might get to go, or I might bring food for them or something like that. And so that's, I've found, a really positive way, and especially like they all kind of encourage each other to strive for that, or I'll kind of hint that maybe they could get another letter on the class reward if they do something in particular, like maybe they all submit their assignment on time or something. And I find that like they sort of encourage each other, like, oh, come on, we've got to get the next letter of our values for our reward. And so that's a really good way to encourage that positive culture in the class. It's something that I've only started doing this year, and so far I've found it really effective. I've seen other teachers do it as well. So yeah, maybe something you could adopt in your classroom too. Okay, my last classroom management tip, and definitely the far most important thing that you could possibly do in a classroom to manage your classroom, is build positive relationships with students. And I know that might be easier said than done, but it is definitely one of the most effective things possible, because if you take the time to get to know the students in your class, work out what they're about, maybe what their strengths are, maybe what their weaknesses are, maybe what their interests are or their hobbies are, and you take an interest in those students, they will respect you and they will trust you a lot more than if you kind of don't show any interest in them outside of being a student. And so what I like to do at the beginning of the year is I get the students to write me a letter, and in that letter they talk all about themselves, and then I'll write a letter in response telling them about myself. And so that's just one little way to sort of show that, hey, I'm actually really keen to get to know you as a person, as a human, not just as a student. And I've found that students really do put a lot of effort into those letters. I do that with every single year level, all the way from 8 to 12. And I have found it incredibly effective at just sort of breaking the ice and getting to know each other in those first couple of weeks. And then throughout the term or throughout the year, my biggest rule is that I always treat the students the way I would want to be treated. So if I expect respect from the students, then I treat the students with respect. If I expect kindness from the students, then I will treat them with kindness as well. So really modeling the behavior that you want to see will definitely build up their trust in you and build up their respect for you as a teacher. And so definitely modeling that behavior, because when they see it, when they see how someone should be acting or how they want to be treated, when they're treated how they want to be treated, they're more likely to treat you that way as well. So I think that's another really important one. Leading on from that, the thing to definitely avoid is embarrassing a student in front of the whole class or in front of a group of people. I've seen it before where a student's done something that they shouldn't have done, and the teacher has taken that student up in front of the class and pretty much just told them off in front of the class. That will immediately break your trust with that student. So any sort of relationship that you'd built, you've now embarrassed them in front of all of their peers. And so they don't trust you anymore because they don't believe that you won't do that again. So that's one thing that definitely avoid. A really good thing to do if there is an issue that you're having with a student, deal with it privately, take them aside, even if they're just sitting at their desk, just bob down next to them and say, hey, I really want to see you focusing right now. I'm not really appreciating the behavior that I'm seeing from you. This is what I'd like to see instead. So having that sort of little private dialogue with the student is way more effective than getting up in front of the class and embarrassing them, because it will break their trust and it will sort of start wrecking that relationship that you have built with them. So yeah, definitely avoid that one if you can. Leading on from that though, obviously things happen in the class and sometimes things absolutely blow out, and maybe you have not a very positive interaction with a student and they get sent out of class, or you have to give them a detention or something like that. Those things can be really effective, and I've definitely done them before and I still use those in particular cases. But what I would suggest is, if you do give a student a detention or you do send them out, have that restorative conversation with them. I know that sometimes it can be really tricky to be able to go to a student and say, hey, like, let's rebuild this. Let's work out where to go from here. But that restorative conversation shows the student that you actually do care about them, that you want them in your class, and that you're going to do what you can to help them be successful in your class. So I always try and do that with a student. So maybe I've sent them out and they're outside for 5 minutes, and then I'll go and have a chat to them. I've had a chance to calm down, they've had a chance to calm down, and we can have that restorative conversation together, because it's super important to maintain that relationship, maintain a positive relationship. It also gives the student a chance to be heard, because maybe you had made them feel, you know, embarrassed or upset or something like that. Something you'd said had upset them, and that had sort of triggered off their behaviour or something like that. So making sure a student feels heard is really important. Obviously, there are times when things just happen and the student might not know why they've done something, but definitely having a chat, you know, and saying, okay, moving forward, what would you like to see from me? And then they can say, oh, you know, I'd really appreciate it if you did this. And then I say, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'd like to see this from you, or something along those lines. But yeah, definitely, if you do have, you know, a big conflict with a student or something like that, or something happens in your class where a student has to be removed or something like that, definitely have that restorative conversation with them. Be the bigger person, and yeah, have that conversation so that they can come back into your class feeling respected, feeling heard, and you've maintained that relationship and that trust with them. So there you have it. They are my classroom management and behaviour management strategies. Obviously, there are so many strategies that work. They are just the ones that I sort of build into each of my lessons or each of my classes to manage the class and create a really effective learning environment for the students. Like I said before, I am definitely no expert. So if you've got any strategies, please share them in the comments below, because I am always open to learning and coming up with new strategies and all those sorts of things. But for now, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all very soon in my next video. Bye!